This is the definitive, objective top 5 superhero movies.
And if you disagree, that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion.
Batman Returns in your top 5. Dan, what were you thinking? Batman Returns.
I immediately regret this list. So welcome to Why It's Great. Today we have a special video, a new kind of video we haven't done before. I'm joined by my brother Andrew, and we've each prepared our own top 5 best superhero movies list, and we're going to compare those and then see if at the end we can compromise and come up with a definitive list. And Andrew, thanks so much for joining me on this call today. Let's just dive right in.
So wait, this wasn't top David Lynch films?
No, we may do that next time, but this is superhero movies, so very similar.
David Lynch is my superhero. That's for sure.
So
all right.
If I'm going to be honest here today, I made a list that's a top 10, I was meaning to whittle it down, and I never whittled it down. So I have 10. So I guess what I'll...
See, this is so Dan. I did the hard work, the soul-crushing work, to eliminate all these great superhero movies that didn't make top 5, and I forced myself to pick 5, and Dan's just like, I just happy-go-lucky. Just why not have all 10? Everyone gets a trophy.
I just ran out of time. It's really what it is.
Okay,
so I figure what I'll do with this, longer list is if you say one that's on this list that I have, I'll just not say that one.
And, let's just address the giant Iron Man suit in the room. This is not an objective list. It's not empirical. This is purely for discussion, and so these lists are arbitrary. They mean nothing. Like, come on, you can't just come up with the 5 best. It's just for fun. So if we don't mention one you love, great. You can be a part of the conversation and add it in the comments. But no witch burnings.
You basically just made fun of the person that clicked this video wanting to know what the top 5 best superhero movies of all time are.
Okay. If someone's clicking because they think there is a definitive list, one, they wouldn't think it's here on this channel. They would be going somewhere else.
Oh, that's fair. Well, let's just jump right in. And Andrew, I think because you did the hard work, your prize should be, your reward for doing it right should be that you get to actually start. So your number 5 pick for best superhero movie of all time, number 5, what is it?
Typical Andrew move. Let me set the context here.
Oh boy.
Here was my thinking while making this list. This is my favorite 5. There's no objective claims what I think are the 5 best, whatever even that would mean. It's my 5 favorite, and I tried to consciously find 5 movies that mean a lot to me, that I love, that cover a lot of different grounds. So I wanted to make sure there was representation from all the major studios like Marvel, DC, Fox, or now Fox doesn't even own those characters anymore, but you know what I mean. And so so that's the context. So there's going to be movies that are not in here, and you're going to be like, what? And hopefully that helps make sense. So my number 5 favorite superhero movie is Batman, Mask of the Phantasm.
Oh.
Good night, everybody. Good night. I just broke the internet.
That is a great pick.
Got to get my blanket because it's freezing.
Yeah, that is a fantastic pick, I got to say. But Andrew, explain a little bit why you chose that as your number 5.
Yeah. Well, for starters, it's one of the very first Batman stories I ever encountered. And you're a little bit older than me, so I think I was even more primed age-wise for Mask of the Phantasm. I don't recall seeing it in theaters because I do know it was released theatrically, but I was a huge fan of the animated series, which is in continuity with this or from the same creators. And so that iteration of Batman is imprinted in my psyche. So like that version of Batman for a long time as a child was Batman for me. Like if you said, Andrew, think of Batman, I wouldn't have thought of Adam West. I wouldn't have thought of Michael Keaton. I would have thought of Kevin Conroy.
Batman, the animated
Batman,
series.
the animated version.
I mean, I loved the animated series. Don't get me wrong, but I think you're right. That movie came right when I was aging out, I think.
Yeah. And so we had the VHS copy at home, Dan, and I destroyed that thing. Like I wore it out. But it's not just a nostalgia pick because I've seen that movie many times recently. Like I watch it almost once a year, maybe once every 2 years. And every single time I'm like just like gobsmacked because it's like a 78-minute movie. It's like barely over an hour. And the amount of psychological story and character development they do with Bruce in this movie it's the best Bruce Wayne story of Batman on the big screen. Another thing I love about it, it's got my favorite aspect of Batman, which is the film noir. It's a detective story for a large part. Like some of my favorite Batman stories from the comics are like The Long Halloween, where he's like actually investigating. And so I love that it's a story really interrogating Bruce's propensity for vengeance through the Phantasm. And you guys have probably already seen it, but this other character, the Phantasm, is doing a lot of stuff in Gotham that people think is Batman, a lot of acts of vengeance that are more violent than Batman would. And so the city is interrogating Batman. Batman's questioning his own propensity for vengeance while he's trying to figure out who this person is. And then the last thing I'll say about this movie that I love, it's my favorite version of the Joker. Because as much as I love
Mark
Heath Ledger,
Hamill.
Yeah. And like the performance of Mark Hamill is what I'm talking about, but also just like what they do with the Joker in this movie is what I want from the Joker. Because like if you take the Joaquin Phoenix route, sure, it was a good performance, but for me, it's like, that's not what I want in a Joker. I want a Joker who walks the thin edge of 1 minute you're laughing at him because he's genuinely funny and crazy. And then at just the turn of a hat, he takes all of that like wacky, hilarious, like, oh, this guy's actually really engaging. And like he draws you in and then he does something totally insane and like heinous and evil. And Mark Hamill's Joker in this version does that throughout the whole movie where he's like, you can't look away from him. You like almost like watching him. You're entertained. And then he like pulls the rug out from under you and you feel awful because of that. And I don't know, this movie just holds up. And the score, it's just so good. The Dark Knight is probably a better movie. But this is a better Batman movie. And I'm not the first person to say that, so that's not an Andrew Drake.
The Dark Knight is a better film with a capital F.
Whatever that means.
But this is a better Batman movie.
It's just a great Bruce Wayne Batman movie. It's just...
Well, because I didn't rank mine properly, as I was listening and like making notes, I think I decided that you should probably just run down your whole list first. That way I can...
No, I don't like that.
You don't like that?
I don't like
Why?
that. No.
Well, what if I say one that's on your list?
Forth.
All right. Well, I guess I'll just start with my like most out there picks, kind of like you did, Mask of the Phantasm. And I'm going to start with Unbreakable. And
number 5.
Number 5, Unbreakable. And I think it barely counts as a superhero film, but I think it does. But, you know, we have a video about M. Night Shyamalan, which you can see. I'm going to do the little thing with the card. It's up here. But I love this movie not only because it is a just fantastic, like kind of mystery story to some extent, because the whole time you're kind of going like, what is the deal with this guy? Like, does he really have this power? Like, is Elijah all that he seems to be? And you're just like, the suspense of it just keeps propelling you question by question by question until the end, when you're like, oh my gosh, he really does have this power. That's really awesome. But I also just love how it like before, and we make this point in the video we made, that like before superhero movies were everywhere and you could see like 15 of them every year, it was already like critiquing the hero's journey, critiquing like comic book storytelling, by just asking really deep questions about the power of belief, the nature of the stories that we tell ourselves, and using like the archetypes of superhero storytelling to do that. So I think it's a very prescient movie. Almost, he couldn't have predicted that superhero movies would like a year later become what they became.
Yeah.
But obviously, like the obvious stuff about it is like the twist ending that just kind of blew everybody's mind. M. Night Shyamalan was still like forging his path as like an amazing director. This was like his second movie to be super popular. And though there's like, not that many superhero tropes, I still think it's a compelling superhero movie because it addresses the same sort of like thematic material.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'll talk a little bit about it because it is on my list. I'll save this when we get there. I'll tell you where it is, but I'll talk about it now and we can kind of just move past it when I get there. Everything you said and more. But another thing I'd add is not only was it ahead of its time, I still think it's unparalleled because at the time there wasn't a whole lot of grounded superhero stories. Like you could argue the X-Men movies were a little bit more grounded with like the muted costumes and like it's kind of set in the real world. Yeah. But I mean, there's still a lot of goofiness in those movies. But I would say no superhero story really has come that close to the realism he encounters there. Because nowadays, when you talk about a grounded superhero movie, what people are actually referring to is like it's violent. There's cursing. They talk about adult stuff, but it's still like people with outrageous superpowers and outrageous scenarios. And this is so realistic in the sense that, sure, he has other than life powers, but it's in such a quotidian way. It's so of the everyday where the most he does is puts on a trench coat and fights is it like a kidnapper? Isn't that who it is? Like a molester?
Yeah, it's like home invader who held these women hostage and who knows what he did with them. Yeah. Like very dark.
There's no huge set piece. He has super strength, but he's not like lifting a bus and throwing it. It's so of the everyday. And I feel like if there actually was someone who realized they were invincible or unbreakable, I should probably use the word of the movie, that if someone in real life realized they were unbreakable, that's what they would do. They'd put on like this like super easy costume and they'd fight the bad guys available to them, which would be like robbers, molesters, kidnappers.
Yep.
And so that like no one's really done that still. And another thing, the filmmaking, the compositions in that film are insane. Like what Shyamalan does visually with his visual storytelling and like how he frames scenes.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason that he, was so lauded, though he had a dip in his career and is like coming back, making big comebacks. I mean, they called him the next Spielberg for a reason. And I just love the depth and the meaning behind a lot of his films, especially with how he uses the color red, and just little details like that. All right, Andrew.
It's very character-driven, thematically driven. And like people kind of people who don't like the movie poo-poo on the twist. And yeah, it is kind of just like it's so last minute, but I mean, it really...
Who poo-poos on the twist?
The reveal of...
I think it's great.
The reveal of Elijah's character is in line with the themes because, it's all about the stories you tell yourself and identity. And he reveals at the last second, I was told I was this fragile, won't become anything person. And I took ownership in a dark way, whereas Bruce Willis took ownership of his story in a positive way. And I think that twist, though it's like flashy, really does cement the duality of those characters.
I think anybody who hates on that twist is just upset at how smart it is. Because you're right. It works perfectly from a thematic standpoint. And I would argue it works from a storytelling vantage. Now, I haven't heard any of this, what you're talking about, but I'm guessing like the twist happens and then the movie's over. Like it's just like very...
Yeah, it's so at
like
the
abrupt.
end, it feels... Yeah, I feel like sometimes when twists happen that late, it gives an audience the impression of, oh, they only did that so you'd have something like shocking to remember the movie by. Which I get that. I could see where you'd come from that. It's like, it almost feels like I have to do one crazy last thing. So maybe it could be a timing thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I don't know if you remember this. Another reason that movie's so personal to me is, I don't even know how this happened, but in 7th grade, I had an assignment to write a movie review. I don't know why a teacher gave that assignment out, but I don't know. We had to write a movie review. So I went home. You were in college. So I called you and I said, Dan, I want to review a movie that like no one else is going to review, like something like cool, because you were like this cool college kid to me in my brain as like a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
And you said, watch Unbreakable. And I had no idea what it was. I only knew Shyamalan as the I See Dead People guy. So I went up to your old bedroom, found the DVD, put it on, and like, it was an experience because I had no idea what it was. I had no idea what to go into, and like, it was a formative movie experience for me. And that was the very first movie review I ever wrote.
Well, there you go.
So,
that started it all right there.
Yeah.
Whew. Well, Andrew, number 4. Let's keep going.
Yeah. Number 4. This is another, I don't think most people would put this in their list, but I like it. Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 2. This one surprised me because when I first wrote my picks, I had the first Guardians.
Yeah, I have
in
the
there.
first Guardians.
Yeah. But then I started thinking, and I was like, well, recently, the one I keep rewatching the most is the second one. And when I really think about it, at the time, when I saw the second one, I was like, that was great. Didn't like it as much as the first. But as time has gone on, the themes and the character moments from the second one have really stuck with me. Whereas in the first one, I love it so much more. It's a better paced movie, the first one is. And it's so funny, but like the conflict in that movie is not very good with the antagonist. Whereas here, the conflict is very personal to Peter. I love how I love the crescendo, the catharsis at the end with Yondu and Peter realizing who his actual family is. And I feel like all those emotional character beats hit harder in the second movie. Though, I mean, people can debate if it's better paced because there are a lot of scenes in Volume 2 where it's just the characters having character moments and the plot kind of like takes a back seat, which when I first watched it, I was a little bored and didn't know what to do. But now when I watch it, I love those moments. Like those moments where Rocket is trying to ensnare all those people trying to get the ship, or again, Rocket and Groot trying to escape and Rocket's trying to communicate with Groot on that ship. And there's just all these little character moments that like the plot takes a back seat that I love. And it's the most unique Marvel movie. The humor for me lands. I know for some people it doesn't. For me, the humor in that movie just kills every single time. And I think it's one of the more thematically rich Marvel movies. I mean, really, the only like thematically rich films in Marvel are like Guardians, Black Panther.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the Iron Man movies, but they're not really going for that.
Right. I would argue
Whatever,
the first one probably, if any Iron Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you, man.
But,
I mean, Guardians, it's definitely my favorite property within the Marvel. Like the standalone movies besides Avengers, the Guardians of the Galaxy movies are my favorite of those movies. And it's probably just because of Chris Pratt. I mean, being a huge Parks and Rec fan, like learning that Chris Pratt got ripped to be in a superhero movie and then finally seeing it and seeing how they incorporated his brand of humor into the big, action movie thing. It really launched his new career as a big action movie star, and it's awesome. I'm like you. I haven't, like you initially, I haven't seen Volume 2 enough for it to have won me over. So I put the first one just because I think I've seen that one 2 or 3 times, whereas Volume 2 I've only seen in the theater. Like, I've never watched it again. With one caveat. Going only on opening scenes alone, Volume 2 wins hands down. I mean, I've watched that Groot dancing opening scene a bajillion times. It's hilarious.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day for me, when I watch that movie, personally, it's the most emotionally resonant Marvel movie. It gets me every time. I love all those characters from the first movie to this one. And it's just so idiosyncratic. It's so unique. I just love the flavor of Volume 2. And every time I watch it, I love the scenes even more. And just like the scenes where like the plot takes a back seat, every time I watch it, I'm like, yeah, let's stay here for a little bit. Let's just hang out. And then the plot finally does come back around, and it all, again, like the conclusion, it crescendos so well, and like all these desperate pieces come together, and it tells the story of you get to choose your family, and you're not defined by your past family trauma. And it just makes me feel so good. It makes me feel good. So that's my number 4.
That's awesome. Well,
and Dan now is going to scramble to pick his.
I was scrambling while you were talking, and I stopped listening.
Yep. So for viewers.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm going to go ahead and say that my number 4 is Superman Returns.
Oh. Dan with a hot take. Oh my God.
Okay.
I did not see that coming.
The first thing I'm going to say is I acknowledge and do not condone Bryan Singer as a human being. And, it just sucks that you have to be in these quandaries sometimes where you have to separate the artist from the art. So just throw that out there. This is not me saying I love Bryan Singer, because obviously. But here's why I think Superman Returns is actually a great movie. And I know I'm probably the only person on earth that's going to say that, but I love that movie. And here's why. Growing up, Superman was always my favorite superhero. And I remember really liking the Christopher Reeves Superman movies, but not like loving them. And so early, I think like 05 or 06 is when that movie came out.
Yep.
That was like in the early boom of these superhero movies. I believe that was the first Superman movie in that boom. And so I was just so excited to finally have a Superman movie, and one that I could be proud of the visuals. But then the other thing that I really liked is, being like some sort of weird purist, I liked that they tried to cast somebody that looked like and sounded like Christopher Reeve. So all of that is like a context surrounding when I watched the movie. And so I just remember just being in the theater and just being so happy to see Superman on the big screen.
Do you remember where we first saw it?
Was it at Showplace 12 in Edwardsville?
No, we watched it on vacation in Branson. Or in the Ozarks.
Did we really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. I remember that vividly because I was also the same way. Loved Superman growing up. I, unlike you, loved the 2 original Reeves films. I watched those religiously, like all the time. I had all episodes of Lois and Clark on DVD. I watched Lois and Clark. I had all the DVDs of Smallville. So I was a huge Superman fan. I remember being in 5th, 6th grade, reading the internet to see who was going to be cast as Superman, rooting for my boy
Tom Welling.
Tom Welling. Like I wanted Tom
I
Welling
think
to be
I might
Superman
have
in this
even
movie
like
so bad.
signed some early internet petition to try and get Tom Welling to be
Yeah.
Superman.
Yeah. And then I was like, who's Brandon Routh? Who's this guy? And then, and I remember being on vacation, and I don't know if me and you did, but I remember like telling our parents we have to see this movie, and they were totally game. And we watched it on vacation. And yeah, look, I still to this day think the movie is more maligned than it should be. I don't like it enough for it to be in my top 5. I do think that has a lot going for it. I love what they do with Superman's character. I love like all the character drama in the film. The idea of Superman being gone for a long time, him coming back and have to reckon with a world that moved on without him, and what's his place, and his internal conflict of, can I actually like be enough for all people? Like, can I really carry this burden of Superman and try and save everybody? I've always loved that kind of thing. I will say that like the particular story they told, I see what they were doing with like the Lex Luthor, like literally trying to like steal land and like grow a new Krypton. Like it's so like weird and convoluted, and it kind of is boring at times. And another scandal noted, Kevin Spacey.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, Spacey's in that. Ugh.
Yeah.
Such a tainted film.
I think there's a lot of good character moments. Brandon Routh is really good. There are some great scenes. It just, for me, doesn't all come together. But when I was 12 years old and saw that in the theaters, I remember being like, yes, because I waited so long for a new Superman movie.
It does have those problems, but I do enjoy any film that has a like self-sacrificial piece to it. And when he doesn't give up, pushes through his weakness, and then basically gives every ounce of that he has. He like basically falls to the earth almost dead. I don't know. I find that is like true heroism. You know what I mean? Like what it means to be a hero is not to put on a suit and just go like, catching women that fall from the sky off of a building. It's like, it's really, truly not giving up even when your powers are gone. So, I don't know. It speaks to me. I can look past a lot of flaws when I have that kind of nostalgic connection. So,
yeah. It was tough for me because I almost put the OG Christopher Reeves film in my top 5. Like that was the one I kept, was like, I have to find a way to put it in here, but like being honest with myself, I haven't really seen it recent years, and that's more of like when I was a kid. I still love that movie to death. Like that original Reeves film, just the earnestness, the heart of that film is insane. Yeah. And honestly, some of those scenes still slap. Like what you just said, Lois Lane about the fall from the roof of the helicopter landing, him flying with Lois for the first time. The whole interaction between Lois and Superman's first interview at Lois's like loft apartment is just the way Christopher Reeves simultaneously shifts from Clark to Superman. There is just perfect.
He's one of the most underrated actors of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all right. Number 3.
Okay. So number 3, Logan.
Number 3.
Number 3 is Logan.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. When I first did the list, Logan wasn't on there, but then I did some thinking, and I was like, you know what? No. Like, when I consider all the Fox properties of, like, that time, I love X2.
Yeah.
I love Days of Future Past. First Class is good. The Deadpool movies are fun. But I was like, Logan is just a cut above.
It's by far the best. It was on my list. Yeah.
I love how really interesting that it came out the same year as The Last Jedi, because if you think about it, they're talking about similar themes where you have an old, seasoned, archetypal hero who is confronting with the ramifications of his violent past, reconciling his legacy and how him and his people didn't win. And actually, there's still a lot of problems in the world. And then having to reconcile his own cynicism and still pass along hope to the younger generation. The fact that those both came out in 2017 is interesting. And I think that type of story is really needed in superhero stories today because it's a generational story. Every generation fights their own battles, whether it be like a war or an ideological war or an ideological battle. And then they inevitably don't conquer it all. And then the younger generation rises up. And every generation, our parents' generation, their parents' generation, has to walk that thin line between, hey, here's what I learned. It didn't all work out, but you need hope. And you're going to learn from all our failures, which is what The Last Jedi is talking about. And this is what Logan's talking about, because you have a very, very violent X-Men character
who's finally able to
gets to the end,
be violent on screen.
Yeah. But this is a guy who was created through evil institutions. So like institutions using money, power, resources to create a human weapon. And there's a lot of metaphors there of how institutions can weaponize human beings and traumatize them. And he's had to live with that trauma his whole life. And he's exercised that trauma through violence and all his dealings with the X-Men. And then you get to this future where what did all that violence bring? Not much good. Even Professor X, that moment with Professor X where he confesses to what he did without knowing and like hurting all those students. It's like the violence we inherit from our institutions, from our societies that comes out in awful ways is like something we need to reconcile with. And I love that that's what this movie's talking about, and how it's really smart because everyone going into the theaters going, yes, we get to see Wolverine finally be rated R violent. But the way they do it, you watch and you go, ooh, I don't like how this makes me feel.
Yeah.
And it's like, because it's critiquing what that violence does. And, you know, and even the kids have the comic books of the X-Men and they give it to Logan and he's just like, that is not what you think. And it's this story that's like really helping you reconcile like our youthful lust for like this comic book violence, and this movie's kind of being like, we got to be careful. We got to be careful. And then he has to pass that along to this other young child who's been traumatized by these institutions. And there's just so much on this film's brain that I don't know.
No, I mean you're saying it best. I don't know that I have anything to add except that as I was looking through my list, the one I was thinking was probably my number one was Logan. Only because I didn't want to go obvious and pick Dark Knight. I have a feeling Dark Knight is not on either of our lists just because it's the obvious one. Logan just feels like talk about Unbreakable, like grounded, the most grounded, realistic, emotionally resonant film in the entire Fox X-Men franchise. And it's funny you bring up Last Jedi. I completely agree. And I think that Logan might be more effective in communicating those themes, because Last Jedi is like 30 years plus removed from the original movies it's critiquing, whereas Logan is like literally the first X-Men movie was the first movie that started the superhero boom. And Hugh Jackman, Wolverine is one of the first characters that like really connected with people on a massive level. And so to be able to use his character to critique itself and what superhero movies became, I don't know. I think it was just more effective because it was the same actor. in the same franchise, only like, a decade removed or decade and a half compared to 30 plus years. You know what I'm saying? Like, and completely different actors.
I think the bigger difference between why Logan was received better for like similar themes was Logan has always been a damaged, cynical character.
Oh yeah, that too.
So when we start Logan, it's like, this makes sense. Luke, there's a whole lot of debate between, is this how he actually would have wound up or not? Because he wasn't that cynical character. And so I think that's why it was received better. But we don't have to get into a whole defense of The Last Jedi.
True.
People will probably already hate us enough with these rankings.
But yeah, man, Logan, it's just so good. And I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I'm just a huge Patrick Stewart fan from The Next Generation. Like, come on, man. Patrick Stewart,
he's so good.
He's the best. And this maybe final, like, I think that Patrick Stewart should get a lot of credit for being this like incredible Shakespearean thespian actor. Like, he is incredible at the highest level of acting. And yet he chooses to do genre movies, starting with like science fiction and Star Trek. And then, he was in X-Men. And it's just like, I don't know. I just give him a lot of credit for not saying that's below me or whatever. But I feel like Logan finally gave him that like fifth gear that we all knew he could go into. Yeah. I'm not saying he's bad in the other ones. He's great. But like the material given to him didn't allow him to elevate it to like crank it to 11. And I feel like Logan, he finally got to be like, y'all know I'm really good. Like really, really good. So he could finally show off like 100% of what he's capable of. So I just enjoyed seeing that.
Shout out to the Picard revival.
Oh.
Love
it.
I hope we get a second season because I really
I feel like the scripts are basically written through the pandemic. So all right.
So that was my number 3.
My number 3 is, this is gonna be funny, Batman Returns.
Oh, the second.
Yeah.
Burton.
Number 4 was Superman Returns. Number 3, Batman Returns.
You are really shocking me. Oh my goodness.
And it's a similar story.
Number 3.
Number 3, and it's because again, I didn't want to go super obvious, and I didn't want to hit on stuff I knew you were going to hit on or had a hunch. So I decided to go personal to me. Right? And
So you like Batman Returns more than the 89 Batman?
I think so. And here's why.
Interesting.
Here's why.
Okay.
Christopher Walken. Danny DeVito.
I'm shutting my computer off.
No, I just think that's the movie, like you said with
Two Mice.
Like you said with Guardians 2.
I love it in Catch Me If You Can. Two mice. Two mice.
That's actually pretty good.
Anytime. Yeah. That's the only thing I can say in this accent. Everything else is horrible. But
well,
okay,
no.
I'm sorry.
So here's the deal. The first Michael Keaton Batman, 1989, is a classic. I mean, Jack Nicholson's Joker and Michael Keaton's Batman, it's just phenomenal. But I feel like the second one is a little bit more Tim Burton. It's a little bit crazier.
Oh, that's true.
And I like that about it. And I just like I like the story of the two villains and how Selena Kyle becomes Catwoman, and the Penguin is just so over the top that it kind of felt like, again, being a kid when these were out, it felt like a cartoon, but live action. But looking back on it now, being able to study it with more knowledge and expertise on like studying film, that, especially having made a video about, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which you can find here, that German expressionism, like otherworldly, crazy set design and like those jagged angles, just like adds to the insanity. And so, like you said about Guardians 2, that's the one I find myself wanting to watch more and more. It doesn't take away from the greatness of the first one with Michael Keaton, but I think it's just a more fun watch to rewatch. So that's why I personally would rank it as high as I do.
Interesting. So we're gonna get so much hate because the only two Batman movies in either of our lists are Batman Returns, which is the just Tim Burton on cocaine, and Mask of the Phantasm, which most people love, but like
they come here, come to Why It's Great because they know we're gonna tell it like it really is, and not just go with the hype.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, spoiler, Dark Knight isn't on my list because, to be honest, I have Dark Knight fatigue. We've been talking about it for over 10 years, ad nauseum. It's in the zeitgeist so much that honestly, like, I'm kind of tired of it. It's a great movie.
I'm with you. I watched it so many times when it came out and when I got it on Blu-ray. I love Nolan. I don't want to take anything away from that movie. It's brilliant. But it's kind of like when you see the most popular kid in school at first, you're like, I want him to be my friend, and like I'm so obsessed with the most popular, but then it's like, get out of my face. Like, you're just too good. I'm not, I just don't find myself anymore ever rewatching that movie. And not to mention that literally every movie after that just copied it. So like now I go to see any other movie and I feel like I'm watching a Dark Knight ripoff. The trailer has the wah sound and you're just like, okay, let's move on.
Yeah, The Dark Knight was so good it hurt DC for a long time because DC thought every movie we make has to be. When they made Man of Steel, this is going to be the Dark Knight of Superman. Like that's such a horrible way to approach it.
Right.
But another thing, real quick, about why I'm kind of on Dark Knight fatigue. I was really late to the game, but a couple years ago I watched Heat for the first time, and I was like, "Oh my god, Christopher Nolan just." Yeah, Michael Mann. Christopher Nolan just made Heat with Batman in it. It's the same movie. The whole dramatic tension between Bruce and Rachel in that movie is every relationship between a man and a woman in Heat, because like the whole Heat's just really deconstructing like toxic masculinity and man's tendency to like, we have to be out there, like going out for the hunt. So like Rachel and Bruce in that movie is basically just Al Pacino and his wife and De Niro and his girlfriend's relationship. The look of the film is very similar. That bank robbery is like, this is Heat.
Interesting.
They both open with bank robberies. It's just,
that is a great movie.
I'm not saying Christopher Nolan ripped them off. He's not ripping Heat off. That's not what I'm saying. It's just it's such a spiritual homage that I was like, oh,
that's interesting.
Like, I don't know. I'm more interested talking about Heat now than I am The Dark Knight.
This is a complete aside, but Michael Mann makes me think of a video I want to make at some point is about Collateral, because I feel like that is a sleeper, like fantastic movie that nobody talks about. But I find myself wanting to rewatch that over and over because there's something so haunting about Tom Cruise's performance, and just the filmmaking is spectacular. I don't know if you've seen Collateral, but
Collateral is great. Michael Mann is the man. Yeah. I love Michael Mann movies. Have you seen Thief?
No.
Oh, dude, you got to see Thief. It's one of his earlier films. It's so good. Oh man. Anywho,
all right, so Andrew's number 2.
Well, this actually will save us some time. My number 2 is Unbreakable.
Okay.
So
we've already
just
talked about that.
Rewind this video to get my thoughts on Unbreakable. It's great. That's my number 2.
Well, we'll jump to...
so do you just want to go into your number 2?
My number 2 is Into the Spider-Verse.
Nice. I was hoping you would include it because I didn't, and that broke my heart.
Yeah.
But I'm glad one of us
Yeah,
did.
and again, that's me saying I want to pick something that's not too obvious, but also worthy of the station of being number 2. Because my previous ones were not really worthy of their ranking. But I think SpiderVerse is worthy of the number 2 spot. And, I mean, obviously, part of the creative team behind Into the Spider-Verse was Lord and Miller, and those guys are just geniuses. Obviously, the innovative animation style is spectacular. It's like there's almost no words to describe how effective it was. I listened to a podcast with them on with Roger Deakins, which, by the way, have you listened to Roger Deakins' podcast? Yes, Roger Deakins has a podcast. It's fantastic. And that he had Lord and Miller on there, and they were just talking about the process of, like, basically they took a huge risk because they had an idea in their head and they didn't even know if it was going to work. Like, they didn't know if their idea was going to, like, look good. And, like, thank goodness it not only looked great, but, like, it looked so, I don't know, it was just like a sight for sore eyes. It was a completely new kind of animation. And that innovation has just been missing in that medium. They talked about how, like, every character that's computer animated, it reached a point where they just all looked the same. And so,
yeah.
But then beyond just those behind the scene things, the movie's just, it's just thrilling and it's a joy to watch. I love the storyline. I love even the twist of who the, spoilers. We've kind of done spoilers for all these. I guess I don't have to do spoiler alert. But, how his uncle, his father figure, ends up being one of the antagonists. And it's like you said before with Guardians, when the conflict is personal to the characters, that's when your story just lands that much better for the viewer. It's more emotionally resonant. It's more effective. And though maybe twists like that can be hokey if not set up right, I thought that one was done extremely well. I didn't see it coming until, like, right before the reveal. I was like, oh, I bet that's, I called it. But it doesn't really count as calling it because it was, like, right before they revealed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just, I don't know. It's a great movie. And I don't even typically like animated superhero movies, but I like this one, so.
Yeah. First thing I'll say about Spider-Verse, John Mulaney as Peter Porker is proof that there is some god out there, because that is just divine casting.
What more do you need?
Nicolas Cage as a Spider-Man Noir, just hilarious. Like, when he's burning the matches just so he can feel something, like, that's hilarious. But it's just, and I want to give credit because Lord and Miller get too much credit for this film because it was directed by Rodney Rothman, Peter Ramsey, and Bob Persichetti. Great job. Yep. The script is solid. Like, Miles's character arc, all the conflicts are personal. His character arc is just executed perfectly. The message that, like, everyone can be a hero, just, like, it's just so good. It's so innovative. The humor lands throughout the whole movie. And you'd think, like, oh, I'm writing a story with this many different characters. Like, it would be a mess for most people. But the fact that it stays focused and gives Miles his arc and makes it his story regardless of, like, all the background noise, man, it's just... I mean, so many people have gone on. If you're watching this video, you know why Spider-Verse is great. I don't have to convince you. But I'm glad you picked it because this is a good segue. I didn't pick it because my number one movie is my boy Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2.
Yeah!
It's my number one.
Which we also made a video about. You could find right here. Dude, Spider-Man 2.
When I think of superhero movie, I think of Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 is the template in my brain, in my consciousness, of a superhero movie. It is, yeah, you know what? It's a little corny. It's earnest. But by God, I love it for
by
that.
golly.
But golly gee, I just love how earnest it is. But, I mean, you were talking about earlier when you talked about Superman Returns. It's a movie that really zeroes in on sacrifice and responsibility. Yep. And as a kid growing up, I ate it up. Peter, look, Tobey Maguire, you all need to stop hating. Tobey Maguire is a great Spider-Man. He captures the dualism of Spider-Man so well, how he can be the just like really everyday, nerdy, homely guy, but then he can put the suit on and be quippy and confident and strong. It's just like he's so relatable. He's so relatable in that movie. Sam Raimi directs the hell out of this movie. It is so well directed. Just like that Doc Ock scene in the hospital alone, he's pulling out some Evil Dead moments. Really what I love about this movie is how focused it is. And you talked about it a lot in your video, how it opens with that shot of Mary Jane Watson and her face, and how that kind of becomes this motif that carries through the whole film, of how she sees him and Peter's internal struggle with his responsibility of being Spider-Man, and how he has to pit what he wants, the life he wants, versus the responsibility he has as Spider-Man. And the movie zeroes in on that tension the whole way. It never strays.
Yes.
It's saying, this is the tension from the first shot. This is the tension of the movie. You want Mary Jane. You want this everyday normal life, but you have this responsibility, and you have to make sacrifices. And the movie never gets distracted with too many villains. It has one villain with a mere opposite character arc.
Yeah.
And it just drives in that tension the whole way. And it's perfect. I love it. And here's another thing I'll say. All these movies nowadays, these superhero movies, try and manufacture awe and wonder and amazement by adding scale.
Right.
So look, I like Endgame. I had a blast with Endgame. Endgame is great. But what they do is they put all these thousands of characters in one shot, and they fill it, and they have it scaled up, and you're like, oh, wow. But nothing compares. Nothing gives me goosebumps like when Doc Ock goes through the glass of that cafe and Peter emerges heroically. It's just like, because it's earned in the story. It's earned in the story.
Right.
Or when Peter stops the train and everyone in the train, like the people of New York, lift him up, like it's earned. You don't need 1,000 characters everyone recognizes. You don't need this CGI scaled mess. You just need a dorky college student who shoots webs out of his arms, earning the story beat. Like, that's all you need. It's just like, I don't know.
I'm so happy you picked that, because I have it on my list, and I thought, I can't put that as my number one, even though I kind of want to, because it's like my favorite.
Yeah, you can.
So because I had put Logan, because I write the rules of this anyway, I'm going to change it.
It's your channel.
That's right.
Yeah.
Spider-Man 2 is also my pick for number one, because doggone it, everybody should like it. And if you don't, then you can have your opinion and you're entitled to it. But I love this movie.
Yeah, you tell him.
Because...
And if you don't, well, you know what? That's fine. But
gosh, here's even more context. And the title of the video we did about that is The Courage of Vulnerability. So I'm going to be a little vulnerable. And I'm going to say that I've always been a bit of a sensitive lad. And I loved Smallville back in the day. My favorite TV show of all time to this day is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I love a good, like, will they, won't they love story. And I'm not ashamed of it.
We have a video on Buffy.
We do have a video on Buffy. And
somewhere.
Yeah, it's a click. And so in Spider-Man, the first one, him and Mary Jane, they kind of set up that will they, won't they. But then they get together, and it's beautiful. It's this great love story. But he still has a secret. he still can't tell her who he is. And that's part of that internal tension as well. This responsibility, the life I want, but like the burden of being a hero. But then there's also the whole thing of like, can I really be who I am in front of the person I love? And I think that's a very relatable struggle, especially for young people. Like I was a teenager when I saw this, trying to figure out who I am. Can I reveal my weirdness to people, and will they still like me? And like, maybe this movie isn't, regarded like it is because it forces people to confront, whether they realize it or not, realize they have to, confront that thought in their own life, in their own mind. But the scene, and I say this in the video, but the scene that gets me is when he saves Mary Jane. He's holding that wall, and you realize
and she sees
that
him.
The mask had been pulled off in the course of the fight, and then her face. They cut to her face. The opening shot is her face. Like over and over, they're cutting to her, how she sees him, right? You said that. In that moment, they cut to her, and the expression on her face is like, my favorite person is also my hero. And he's like, oh no, she sees me. And it's just this beautiful shot that like moves me, even thinking about it, of like that moment when you're finally fully yourself in front of another person, and they see you and they love you, they respect you, and they see your warts and all, flaws and all, weirdness and all, picking weird movies on your top 5 and all, but yet they still appreciate you and they want to be with you. And it's just beautiful. It's moving, and no other superhero movie goes that deep. You know what I mean? Like, it's just...
Well, I mean, it's less that it's deeper than every other movie. It just, it earns and executes its message very well.
It's
like,
effective.
again, like I was saying, like, put as many superheroes you want on one shot, put as much CGI. Nothing gives me goosebumps like that moment when he's finally vulnerable and open, and she sees him and he realizes, oh, this whole time I didn't have to be this overly guarded. And I could have actually, there is something to be said about letting someone in. Even though I have this responsibility, it's finding that balance. And he went too far to one side, and he was losing his, like, I love that whole plotline of him losing his powers and the psychology of that as his character, which, fun fact, that comes from Michael Chabon, who was the showrunner on Picard and wrote my favorite book of all time, Cavalier and Clay, which I would grab it, but I'd have to go way back there. Because he wrote the first draft of Spider-Man 2. Anyway.
Really?
But,
wow.
Yeah, he wrote the first draft of Spider-Man 2. Yep. And that was one of the plot lines that the next screenwriter carried over. But it's earned so well. I love the emotion. 2 words. Pizza time. Just gets me every time.
I thought you were going to say...
it's so good.
Christopher Walken. No, just kidding.
The 2 mice.
Okay. Well...
it's just so good. Is it campy? Is it a little anachronistic nowadays? Like, sure, it's a little campy, but like, just open your heart a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. Again, it comes down to, when I think superhero movie, what I want is something like Spider-Man 2. It has great action. It has a focused story, focused conflict, a strong character arc. It has heart. It has humor. It has like excitement. Just Sam Raimi.
Cut
this out,
yeah,
please. Sam Raimi, which I'm excited for him to do Doctor Strange. He just kills it. He just kills it.
He's incredible.
Good. What was going to be your number one?
I wrote Logan, but we already talked about it.
It was going to be Logan,
and I just decided.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to create an ultimate top 5 here at the end with a mix of our lists. Will probably be most of your list. But But before I do, I just want to throw out a couple honorable mentions that I don't want to talk about very long. But I did write one more. Actually, I just want to do one honorable mention because I think it's interesting, and that's Blade.
Blade 2?
I just wrote Blade because it's been so long since I've seen those movies. I don't remember. Like, I have so many memories of awesome stuff, and I don't know which movie they were in. But remember I was like on Letterboxd, and I saw that, and I was like, Blade. I like completely forgot that those movies existed.
I thought you were going to have Blade in your top 5.
Yeah,
for sure.
It is.
Because you introduced me to Blade.
I freaking love the Blade movies, and I am ashamed to say I forgot they existed probably for the last 10 years. Like, I think the last time I watched one...
Blade 2, Del Toro, man.
That's
Blade
right.
2 is amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so I might want to change one of mine and put Blade in there. But I love Blade. I want to watch them again because I don't really remember them.
Just kick out one of the returns and put Blade in
Returns.
there. I'd be happy. Okay, well, a mega list. We already have some in common, so Logan will be in there, and so will Unbreakable.
Right. So
those two. For sure.
And Spider-Man 2. I just went ahead and put Spider-Man 2 as number 1. What number 2 I think should be Unbreakable. This is just your list.
This is my list
at this
so
point.
far.
Number 3 is Logan. Yeah, that's your list. I think that we should throw SpiderVerse in the number 4.
That's fair.
Because I think it's better than
Deserves
Guardians 2. And then
yeah,
this last one is the tough one for me. Because I don't think the rest of my list should be on it. I don't think the rest of your list should be on it. But I'm going to go ahead and put Mask of the Phantasm.
There we go. Do you want two animated in this mega list? You know what? I'd be down with Blade 2.
All right, Blade 2.
Even though we hardly talked about it. Then it came out of left field. Why not? Let's put Blade 2 up
That's
there.
our list, everybody. The ultimate top 5.
This is the definitive, objective top 5 superhero movies.
And if you disagree, that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. All right, but here it is, the ultimate. Our definitive top 5 greatest superhero movies of all time. Number 5, Blade 2.
I love how it just came out in like the 11th hour. We didn't even really talk about it. I love it. I love it.
Number 4, Into the Spider-Verse. Number 3, Logan. Number 2, Unbreakable. And number 1, Spider-Man 2.
But more importantly, let us know about your list. Please tell us what you thought about our list. Tell us your 5 favorite. We'd love to talk and get this debate going.
Absolutely. Well, this has been an adventure. Let us know in the comments what you think of this format. Do you want to see more videos like this? Or do you wish that the YouTube algorithm just like buries this off in the deepest corner of the internet that no one will ever find? Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Andrew, for joining me here on this extended conversation. And I'd like to thank our patrons. We'll put them here for being awesome and supporting us. We couldn't do crazy shenanigans like this without you. And, you know, we'll see you in the next video. That was a bad sign-off.
To my Christopher Walken.